Right. Hopefully you can all see the mural. Has that worked? Oh, thank heavens for that. Right. So what we're going to do is going to do the standard icebreaker, etc. Run through the plan for today, do that tiny bit of housekeeping that we always do, catch up on when the next meetings are and what they're going to be about, and then we'll move on to the previously on, which is now on the CMS. So there's no longer a big previously on. I just point you to our new little content management system, or it's now called additional information. And then we're going to deep dive into stop statuses today, because there's 148 different languages of stop statuses in there, and I'm trying to get my head around how some of you have done it, how you did it in the past, how you're doing it now, what this actually means, so that we can look at what we should be looking at and how we can talk to people about what these stop statuses actually means. Because if I have somebody tell me, but this is really simple, surely it's really obvious what's active and inactive, I know that for this group that's not quite so simple. Oh, we lost Daniel for a second. I'm sure I can't read the chat messages at the moment either, because of course my desktop can't connect up. If there's anything I need to know, I'm going to rely on Geeta, who will introduce themselves in a moment. So we'll run around and we'll do our icebreakers. So your name, pronoun, where you're from. Oh, and I forgot to change it from last time. So if you're here last time, you're going to get it again. Choose a different bus seat. But it's like my favorite seat on the bus is. So I'm Dr. J. I use they as pronoun. I'm from DFT. I'm the service owner for Naptan. I'm a handover service designer type person. My favorite seat on the bus used to be the one upstairs at the top, so I could drive a bus around London. Now I struggle to walk up and down the stairs while the bus is moving. I like the disabled seat by the doors down the bottom. So you're facing forward, because I like facing forward, but you're kind of a little bit tucked away. You're on the non-driver's side. It's my favorite little seat to get. So I'm going to go down in alphabetical order. So Amy, you're the next one up.
Hi, I'm Amy Armstrong from Durham County Council, Information Team Leader. Pronoun she, and my favourite seat, well, I don't have an option to be honest with you because I've got two children, and it is top deck right at the very front. Although we did the other day go on a bus and was very impressed because it was like being on a train with a table.
Oh wow. Is that
Yes.
instead of buses you're getting in where you are in Durham?
Yeah, top deck table. Yeah, kids were very impressed. So we didn't
Wow.
actually sit at the front of the bus. We sat upstairs with a table.
Was that like a four-seater with a table in the
Yeah,
middle?
yeah.
I am bemused and gobsmacked.
Yeah, it was good. First time I've ever seen one.
That's amazing.
Mm.
Di, you're the next one up.
Hello, I'm Di Wright from Connect Tees Valley. I'm a she, her. Favourite seat on the bus, always top deck, front corner, above the driver, unless it's really busy, in which case as near at the front of the bus as I can without being in the disabled spot so I can get off quickly when we get to destination.
Perfect. Thank you. Geeta, you're the next one up.
Hi everyone, my name is Gitanjali. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the product owner from the technical and the process space working on the accessibility of Naptan. My favorite seat is downstairs only, but which is a bit high on the back tire, which is high from the normal ones. So that is the one I like. Yeah, thank you.
Fantastic. Ian, you're the next one up.
Hi, I'm Ian McGregor from Connect Tees Valley, he, him. We use Naptan software, the Trapeze Novus software. My favourite seat on the bus is upstairs at the front, whichever has the biggest legroom, except on my local route, which if you sat there, you'd have to duck when we went under a low bridge and it would be a single deck when it came out.
Are you somewhere where the double decker has actually run into a bridge recently?
No, they've managed to keep them all single deck since they started the route. There have been a few cases in the past where buses have become open toppers.
Oh no. And Leon, you're the last one on this.
Hi everyone, Leon Byford, Product Manager at Transport for London. Pronouns, take your pick, any will do. And favourite seat on the bus is still the figurative cubbyhole cupboard under the stairs from last time. But second favourite is, as close to the exit as possible.
Absolutely. Fantastic, everyone. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to run through our quick bit of housekeeping, show everyone where the CMS is, and then we will run through, just a sec, I just need to tell it not to restart. I almost had that 18 seconds before this computer shuts down on you. Just trying to remember where I'm at. We've got a YouTube channel, we've got an Eventbrite, and we've got the newsletters. If you follow us on Eventbrite, we use Eventbrite for managing the sign-ups to the meetings, and that's just a historical thing. And somebody asked me why we did it on Eventbrite the other day, and I'm like, I think it's to push it out so that it's not just a Teams link, so that people who find out about it can come and join it. And we publish everything up on the YouTube channel. I'm a little bit behind. When I published this month, I'll publish last month's as well. The next meetings are on rail replacement buses and more rail. There's actually some quite big stuff coming through that we are going to be doing next year. So if you've got rail stations in your local authority, and or you've got some rail replacement buses because you've got rail stations, there's going to be some quite chunky stuff at those meetings. Because of flights trying to get back from Gotland, I couldn't get back on the Tuesday, so I've had to move it to the Tuesday in December. My apologies. There's no December public meeting because that would be in the Twixtmas, and we're all doing Twixtmassy things and having a break. In January, we're going to have an update on the accessibility. February and March, still trying to decide what we're going to do, and I'll plan out the rest of the year. If you've got things that you'd like us to talk about, throw some stickies there and let me know, and I'll have a think about how they fit in with what we've got planned, and we can put them down. Otherwise, it'll be just up to whatever feels like a good topic to tackle. Performance metrics for NAPTAN, which I've forgotten to go and do. We are running, actually, I can do this real time. You can see me run to our support page. This is how we know what you've done every day, because we check all of the uploads every morning to make sure that everything's going well. And I can run a metrics report for September, because October, actually I'll do October because we're almost finished with the month. Takes a few seconds. The web uptime, that's 100%. Then the few percentage down is just because we've got a couple of proxies that take a little bit of time. Hi BB, I'm just running through the metrics. API uptime is 100%, and we've had 259 files from local authorities that we've processed within that month. So that's how I get the metrics that I report here. And anything that we've made decisions on the CMS, anything that we've made decisions on and things that you need to know is now under additional information. We're slowly, this is the MVP of this page. One of the goals that we've got is to make it to give it a little bit more richness, but you can get all the different bits of guidance. We've got all the information about the accessibility on NAPTAN as it comes through, and we've got our public meetings and newsletters there. We're also planning to have all the statistics available nice and easily for you. So that's all the housekeeping out the way. Stop statuses. Why do we need to talk about them? We have about 435,000 or so. We've got a lot of stops in the NAPTAN data set. Of those, about 36,000 minus a bit of change are actually in invalid states. And when I say invalid, and I'm now applying myself, they're invalid because they're not statuses, they're not combinations that are valid in the schema at all. So the schema had set some ideas of how you might use this the status and the modification, and you've for 35,000 stops, we've gone and done our own separate things. There's a slight difference between the CSV and the XML, so I've used both to do the analysis, and I've just explained why. And there's only one stop using pending, which is hilarious because I don't quite understand. So what I tried to do was put down the number of stops in the state, which schema version it's valid in, what the status and what the modification are, and what it means on the street, as far as I understand. And then we've also got archived as a status, which is only used by Hertfordshire. Did I say that right? Hertfordshire. It's only used by 210.
Hertfordshire.
It's
Hertfordshire.
Yeah.
Brilliant, because yeah, English place names. There are a whole pile of them that were set to archive, but it's not a status that was ever done. There was also a number of stops that just 6,500 stops that just disappeared from the system in a replatform. One of the replatforms, a whole pile of stops disappeared. I can go and find them in the data set, but we can't figure out how they disappeared, why they disappeared, what stop procedure ran, whether they were supposed to disappear. Not a Scooby-Doo, but also it was over 10 years ago, and none of you all have come and screamed at me about these missing stops. You've probably put them back in if they were anything that you used, and if you've reused the ATCO code in that time. I know this sounds very blasé of me, but also it's a big historic pile that's over 10 years old. I don't think I need to fix it, because I think within those 10 years, anything that would have arisen from it, you've all fixed point by point by point, if there was anything still outstanding from that. So rather than going through and going, what does this mean? What does that mean? I thought to go through and have a look at what the type of stop statuses are, because this is what I believe are the four, and I'm using a mark stop, and I know custom stops are slightly different, but using a mark stop because it's the easiest one to conceive of and to walk through. There are four statuses that a stop can be in, and think of and get an understanding whether or not that's actually right. So I think there's awaiting planning approval. You've got a stop that you would like to use. You think you know where it's going to be. The bus operator thinks it knows where it's going to be, but you're having to go through the whole planning of you want to live close to a bus stop, but outside my house is too close. Put it outside my neighbour's house. Planning permissions to move the stop around and to get the stop in. So you need to put the stop in so that bus operators can start to plan their routes, but there's nothing there yet. It's kind of in that nascent state. The next one is the bulk of it, which is available. There's a bus stop. There's physical stuff on the street. We know where the bus stop is. We know what it's called, and everyone wants to use it. It's a bus stop. That's your available stop. Then there's not used. Now, I don't quite know how we represent this. These are stops which have been either moved beyond the tolerance. So I know that for some of you, when you move a stop beyond a certain point, you then say, no, that stop has moved up and down the street by more than 500 meters or so. I'm going to give it a new number, or I'm going to cancel the old stop and put it in as a new stop because it's moved beyond that tolerance of what should be moved. Because again, this is not clearly stated in the schema as to how big that tolerance is. It just says if it moves, you may want to consider. Now applying myself again. We need to have, and it could have moved because of an issue such as traffic management. The street furniture might not be present because you might not have moved the street furniture. So, and they're not used in any bus routes. So do we put them in as not used? Do we put them in as you shouldn't use them? How do we indicate that these stops are ready, available, but you could use them, but nobody is? Or how do we think about them that way? And then there's the remove stops, which is we've all got those stops where the roads come out or something's happened and we've decided to take that stop completely out of service. We've removed all the street furniture. The stop no longer exists. There's been replaced by another stop. For example, in Manchester, when they tore down the bus station and put in the shopping mall, they had to remove the stops in the middle. Are those the right is that the right way to think about stop statuses? Thinking about the street and the schema and what you're trying to represent. Di, I can see you going. I can see you move and twitch.
Yes.
Yes, but
You also need to think about what's happening with our data. For example, the bus operators, sorry, cat, can't access stops that aren't active in their software. So if the stop isn't active, it wouldn't appear on Google Street View. It would, not Street View, Google Mapping. It wouldn't appear to be used in their OmniTimes or Omnibus, whatever they're using. Yeah.
Is that true? And I'm going to just challenge you just in that little question, because when you made me those lovely scones and I was down talking to you and your bus operators, you'd talked about the fact that one of them, and I can't remember which of the two from the big four said this, that they'd had some trouble where a recent update to their system meant that they saw inactive stops as well as active stops in their system, and it caused them some confusion, and they'd put some wrong stops into their exchange files, and you'd pick it up. So they should only see active stops.
They should only see active. Yes. Okay. Yeah. You
just wanted to make sure. No.
Yes.
It's not a gotcha. It's a clarification to make sure that there's a slight difference.
Yeah. I mean, I suspect that should have been fixed.
I'm sure it's been fixed by now. That was quite some time. That was over a year ago, wasn't it?
It was.
Look, I need to do another road trip, obviously. So bus operators should only be seeing those active stops in their software. So what is the difference between and I'll get onto this in a moment, is an inactive stop a stop that is waiting to be removed, or is it this not used? And then I'm just trying to figure out what this middle status is here, and get you, it's got street furniture, but it's not used by a bus.
For me, that would still be active. It's available for use.
Right. So
the other Ian will back me up on this as well, that if you remove a bus stop, then you should remove all the physical trappings of a bus stop, but you wouldn't do that if it was just not served by a bus, or we certainly don't do that in the Tees Valley, because if a bus operator decided they did want to go that way again, to reinstate a bus stop and all the trappings of it is extremely difficult and takes time and money. So we just leave them there.
We're exactly the same in Durham.
And Leon, I take it you're gonna nod and say you're probably the same in London. I know it's more of a Gerard question.
Well, I had a look at our data, and so we've got 5 stops that are marked as inactive, and they all have the modification delete. So it's the same 5 stops that are delete, and same 5 stops that are inactive. And so I think we essentially just use inactive when we've deleted stops. Although concerningly, I realised that one bus stop on there is the Streatham Station bus stop, and we have a web page for that stop. And for all of these stops we have web pages, but we are providing live arrivals for that stop, which is apparently deleted. So probably need to look into what's going on there.
Leon's discovered the great joy of, I'm going to go and look at something. Oh, I've pulled on a thread and I'm now 16 layers deep in Naptan data trying to figure out what's going on. So what I'm trying to think about is there any time when a stop would go from available and active to not available for now, or pending potentially going out of service? And Di, I saw your hand went up before I asked that question, so I'll hand it to you.
But just to go for your awaiting planning approval, yes, we do have stops that go in when we don't have a physical location yet, but they need to go in as active, because then the bus operator can't see them. They need them in there in order to get their routes registered.
Right.
So there isn't an actual category for awaiting planning approval. It's an active stop. It might move once something physically goes in. It might even get renumbered, which has happened as well, because it went in on the other side of the borough boundary. But yeah, it had to be there. And what was your question again? Was about
Was
yes.
about,
So roadworks. If it's long-term roadworks, we would potentially put the stop as pending and basically take it out of use for that time. But then we'll have already amended the bus services to say they're not serving that stop anyway. So essentially, it would just turn into a active but not used stop for the time period.
But you'll need that in your NAPTAN database, so won't you, Di, for bus operators for when they do their registrations?
Yes. I don't know if they would see pending. So
we've
I've
only got
used
one
it once,
stop.
but
Yeah. I don't know who the stop is for pending. I would try to go check, but my computer is so likely to accidentally restart. I'm not doing anything outside of this Chrome browser right now. Yeah, because I think, and I'm going to dive into a little bit more about what some of these mean. And I know that it is very much back to what is a bus stop questions, but it's really trying to dive into what we're trying to express with some of these statuses. Just because I'm not sure that we've got it right across all the 148 different local authorities. I know there's not exactly 148. There's 148 AGCO codes. There's about 144 local authorities now. Soon to be another one. Ian, I'll throw it to you because I want to hear your question.
Yeah, I was just really going to pick up on, I think Di's kind of touched on it already. It's just they're not used. Obviously, there's a lot of stops that are suspended short term for roadworks, but we've got one that I can think of where it's out of use for about 2 years or so. Di will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's been taken out of the data set altogether. It'll just be put in as a new stop afterwards. But although it does, as far as I know, it does still exist. It's just kind of impractical to use because they've cordoned off the entire pavement, so there's nowhere for anybody to wait.
Is that so? I know previously when we had a timer in the old system, there was a timer. If it was in a particular state for more than a certain time, the system would go and remove it automatically. We decided against that because we wanted to give yous as local authorities, because you know your data best, give yous the control over when something is removed entirely from the system. So long-term suspended should now be possible, but how would you mark that one as inactive so that nobody could use it?
If it's long term, I would mark mine as inactive. But that's not deleted, just inactive.
Yeah, because it's going to come back. It's going to be resurrected once the roadworks are finished.
We tend to, not many would we actually physically delete, unless we were 100% sure it wasn't coming back. It's a lot easier in NAPTAN to make something inactive and then just make it active again.
Yeah.
And I mean, for example, in our system that we've got, Di uses the same one. Di, have you got the same categories? We've got an active not in NAPTAN.
Oh, no.
An inactive, a pending, and a proposed, not NAPTAN. So when they export, it's in our system, but it doesn't export as NAPTAN.
Okay.
So
no, I don't have those.
And you've also got was it an suspended or a pending, not a NAPTAN?
I've got a active. I've got a active, not NAPTAN. Don't know when I would really. I suppose that's could be like what you're saying with suspended. I suppose. A inactive, pending, and proposed, not Naptan. To be honest with you, the only ones I ever use are active, inactive. Don't tend to use pending because I don't tend to find out about the stops until it's basically going to be on a bus route and it's sorted.
Can I just double check which system you're using, Amy?
I'm using the Trapeze system.
Just give me 2 seconds.
But I'm on a later version than what Di is currently. Is that right, Di? Just by a little bit because they're not putting you forward yet.
Yeah.
But we will eventually be on the same version.
Newer Trapeze. Yeah, because we're working with them to put in a managed removal on Trapeze. We've got some conversations ongoing to help them because you can't delete stops from your local system, so you can't get on managed removal yet to remove the dead. You've sometimes put them in the middle of the North Sea. So Halfsec, if I Di, could you help me with yours and just let me know which ones you have on older Naptans, on older Trapeze?
I have active,
Yep.
inactive,
Yep.
pending,
Mm-hmm.
and archive, but I don't believe the archive works.
No, it doesn't. Well, no, not works. Okay, so that's interesting. That
and if you
even
wanted to know, ours is 5.017.
5.017.
Oh, that's interesting.
Sorry, 5.0.17. Yeah, what are you on, Di?
5.0.
No, ignore that. Sorry, no, that's what it's.
Yeah. So, Di, do you have the same? Do you have your Trapeze number?
Yeah, 5.0.19.
0.19.
2 seconds. I'm just going into my settings because that's what comes up on the top. But I'll just go into my settings.
You go into info.
Yeah.
There should be a info bit.
Yeah, mine's 5.9.
I thought it was
5.9.
But my toolbar says it's a 5.0 something. So it's 5.9.x mine is at the moment, but I am about to test a later version than that.
Cool. If you do end up with different stop statuses, that would be really good to know because I'm just trying to figure this out. Leon, do you know? I know you've got your hand up and we've gone down and we're going down a little rabbit hole. Do you happen to know what stop statuses you have, or is that?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
Okay. It's a Gerard question, isn't it? Because
yes.
Gerard spends his day dug into the details. I know that he's on a version of Diva, but it's a London version of Diva, which is different to everyone else's version of Diva. Okay, so that's good to know. What was I trying to do next? Yes. So Leon, your question before I run down another little rabbit hole.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to say that we wouldn't typically update the status of a stop, if it's kind of no longer in use, whether kind of short-term, temporary, or longer term, because this kind of information would be usually be provided through our countdown feeds where we provide flexible messages. So let's say bus stop is closed for some reason, we would typically put out a message to say this bus stop is closed, please use the previous or the next stop. But the status in Naptan would remain active typically. So I think it's quite rare that we would sort of set a stop as being inactive, and we would sort of it would be that disruption message or just the lack of a timetabled service at that stop that would indicate that you can't actually use that stop.
Yeah, because just so that I'm clear, your London's a franchise, so you set up a franchised area. So you set up the routes. You as the local authority control the bus routes, not the bus operators. So you tell the bus operators where to send the buses, which is slightly different, I think, to Di, Amy, and Ian, who put in the stops, and the bus operators have to do the whole things. Yes, Daniel, I saw a thing from Daniel. If somebody could reply and say, yes, we'll put them up on the YouTube channel, that would be amazing. Thank you, Geeta. Or Bibi. So, or lack of service via countdown, which is your, and it's that difference between franchised and non-franchised is a question. So this is going to make some of the next pieces quite
Sorry,
interesting.
Just to kind of clarify, so I meant, there's no timetabled service, so there can be no live arrivals for many different reasons. Maybe there's no scheduled time for the next 30 minutes for whatever reason. But I think the key thing is if there might be a situation where there's no, in the timetable data, there's no service scheduled for X number of days or something, and so that would mean that it's not inactive in the NAPTAN data, but effectively it's inactive.
It's inactive in the real world, in realsies. The thing that I'm aware of in London, and I'm just going to ask this of Di, Amy, and Ian, in London, which I know is an entirely different world to everywhere else in the world, often when a bus stop is suspended or out of service, there'll be a big yellow little thing saying this bus stop is suspended and your nearest bus stop is, and it will point you to the nearest bus stop. Do you do that in where you are, or is that something that only somewhere like London can afford to do because London is London? Di's having a think.
But in the Tees Valley, most of the time, if we get to find out that the stop is suspended, we'll put a notice at the bus stop. Whether it's actually accessible for people to read depends on the nature of the suspension. But that's what we try to do.
When you said if we find out, that indicates that you may not find out that a bus stop is suspended before it's suspended.
Or at all sometimes.
Okay. Notice if find out suspended. Is that the same up with you, Amy?
Yeah.
I was making an assumption. I just wanted to confirm.
We would put either notices if it's a short-term suspension and reroute to bus service or something like that. The notices would go out at the stops. Roadside information would change if the stop no longer had a service going to it, and but the stop was still active, basically. So there is a possibility. I mean, we've got one at the moment where there is the service no longer runs via an estate, but we are looking at alternatives for that. So we'll still keep the stops active.
So that's interesting. So again, trying to understand the realsy world, the data world. So you, on your bus stops, you've got little timetables that say these are the bus services that will come past. I know we do the same in London.
Yeah.
If buses stop running to that stop for and we'll say a long-term period, we'll say three months or more, you've taken away the little piece of paper that says these are the services that run through that stop. So people know that they don't. Yeah, with either go find another stop or your nearest stop is somewhere.
Yeah.
And if it's suspended for a shorter period of time, you'd either put something, and you find out about it, you'd either put something in the little case, or you'd put something over the top of the
just
shelter.
Notices, yeah.
Yeah. Right. No, that makes a ton of sense. I just wanted to make sure that I understood the one of the things that I think is really difficult with NAPTAN, and I use the term, it's a digital analog. It's not a digital double, but it's an analog of the real world, because you're trying to represent what's going on, what somebody's going to find when they're at a bus stop using data, but you can't. You're kind of running at a couple of distances removed, especially in a lot of places, because you don't have control over when bus stops go out of service and things like that. You're finding out about them later. This is all good to know. Right.
I would
Taking a
always
deep
keep
breath.
that stop active.
Oh,
I
yes.
wouldn't put that as pending, because I don't know about you, Di, or anybody else. I tend to find a lot of my stops, even with no services, are still classed as active. There's not many that I would actually put as inactive. It's only if I really know that it's long-term counsellor involved and the likelihood is that stop's going to be removed.
Yeah.
Cool, because I'm going to deep dive into inactive in a moment. So one of the fun things that I uncovered is we've got new active. What I wanted to understand was what did we think new was for, and what did new actually mean? Because I did a little chart, and we have some who are new and blank, which is an invalid state, so we'll just ignore those. Got a whole pile of their first modification. So this is the modification number that's listed beside a stop. We have a whole pile with new modification 0, so it's the first time they've gone in the data set. And then we have a whole number going up to, and I listed out to 20. The more than 20 went up to 750 something. So there's a new stop that's been modified 750 times.
Wow.
Yeah. So not shaming anyone and not saying, but I wanted to understand, when you use active new, what are you trying to tell us in the data? What are you trying to communicate across in the data using this new? And what did we think it was used for? Because I know you were all thinking you're communicating something to bus operators or to the people who are consuming your naptan. So what is new for? I said was, it should be is. Di.
It's, for me, I don't select new. I don't think I've got the ability to select new. However, if it's a stop that has not been modified at all since it was imported into the system, then it will still be designated new. But if it's had a name tweak, if it's had a slight position tweak, then it will be down as a modified stop, and therefore would no longer be new.
Yeah, because it's revise is the next one.
Yes.
So there's new and revise.
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand why we had revise. If we've got these modifications. So Amy and I know, and I'm not going to suggest that you're old and you've been around forever, but I know that you've been involved with Naptan forever. Do you recall at all why we had new in the first place?
No.
Again, I just think it was the first time that stop was added to the data set. I mean, back in the early days, we were doing it on Excel spreadsheets.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was just part of that, I think. But again, not something that we selected as and even the revise wasn't something you selected. It was just the process of data.
Yeah,
right.
we used to select the revise number if we made amendments when we used to do it on the Excel bit. But now with the trapeze system, they just automatically, as soon as you do an amendment, amend the revised version of it.
Yeah.
But was it never used by an operator then, Di, for whether it's new, just sorted on that kind of column? Because is it still the case now? Years ago, and I've always gone off this, but I don't actually know if it's true or not. Once you delete a stop, that's it, it's gone, and you can't make that stop active again.
Not true.
Not true, right? Okay, because that was one. when I first started, I've never questioned it until this conversation today, I was always told, right, that's it. Once you delete a stop, that is it. So I don't tend to delete anything. And this is when we went back to the old system that we were on, where we used to use the Excel spreadsheet. Now, bearing in mind, Durham didn't stop using that until about 3 years ago.
With the Naptaminator on the was it an Amiga or an Amstrad?
Yeah, an Acorn.
An Acorn.
Yeah,
I knew it was one of them.
it was a RISC OS system we used to use. Yeah, so for us, I never really delete a stop, because I was always told that if you delete a stop, you can't make it active again, and you'd have to redo the NAPTAN reference number of it. But if that's not the case, then
No, I believe that you can't delete as in it's never going to be used again until it went to the archive. That was brought in later, wasn't there from the very beginning.
And archived was never rolled out properly,
was never rolled out properly.
Which is because that required everyone to be on 2.4. And at the time when I joined NAPTAN in 2020, there was only 15% of you on 2.4. There's now 48% of you on 2.4. We're soon going to do a tipping point, but that doesn't really make any difference, because 2.4 and 2.1, they have the same a bit crazy here, and that's why we brought in that whole managed removal system that yous can't get to at the moment, because you're on Trapeze, and Trapeze is going to have to do a bit of work to be able to handle it. But that whole managed removal system was so that you could basically permanently delete stops. So for example, in TFL, we've just worked with Gerard to permanently remove a number of stops from Heathrow Airport, because we had some for Terminal 1 that no longer exists at all, no longer physically exists, but we had a whole pile of stops for Terminal 1. So we took those out, because if Terminal 1 is ever rebuilt, they'll be nowhere near where they were, and so we just remove them to clean it up so that nobody could accidentally attempt to get to Terminal 1. So it's all of those very, very old ones that we are starting to clear out of the data set. So in my mind, this whole inactive deleted was kind of like, it's a holding pen waiting for that perma removal, but they can always go backwards. And this was one of the problems with the old system, and this is just my understanding of the old system, which is why statuses is such a nightmare. The old system, if you're in inactive deleted for more than, and I think it was 2 years, it could have been 3 years, it was a number of years, if the stop was in that state for more than a certain period of time, there was a little process that would run and remove that stop from the data set. And I don't know quite how that happened. We could never figure out with the stored procedures what it was doing, because by the time I got my hands on the system in 2020, that had broken in 2016. That's why when I talked earlier, there's a whole pile of stops that went missing in one of the migrations, and we literally cannot figure out where they went. No, but it was also a migration back between 2013 and 2016 of a system somewhere. Whether it was the stored process actually ran for some time and deleted some stops and not others. But we're just sitting there going, I can generate a list of them, but it's not going to help anyone now, because it's been almost over 10 years and nobody's come. And that time, if you needed it, at least one of you would have come screaming at me about it. Not to suggest that you scream at me, but somebody would have come to DFT and gone, why are these stops missing? Can we put these stops back in? But nobody's come and asked about them. Di,
and if
you're going to tell me.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Just
We'll go to Di and then we'll come to Amy. How's that?
I don't think it was an automatic process. I think it was a parameter. So you could archive stops as long as they'd been deleted for at least 2 years.
But you had to actively do them, something on your side.
so that they wouldn't
interesting 'cause that's-
automatically do it for you.
Yeah, because that's interesting because that's different to what I've got in the emails where I tried to trace down how this worked. But also, like I said, it was something from we are raking over some very, very old stuff, and I've got partial information. We're relying on people's memories and some emails, and nothing was written up, which is why we've got a bit of a mess around what is deleted, what is inactive, what these statuses are used for, and I'm trying to figure out what new is used for because I can imagine way back in the day it was used to as a very quick way to identify, hey, somebody's created the stop that I was waiting for because I've looked at the new stops and here is the new stop. But you can do that by modification number. So why did we do a status? Or am I just being naive about people's facilities with data? Amy, you had a thought, and I've quite clearly derailed the train.
Mine was basically about to say the same as what Di was, with the process. And obviously for us, unless it's done at a local authority level, we submit another NAPTAN each time.
Yeah.
And therefore, if it's in our NAPTAN as an active stop or inactive or whatever, that would override anyway. So I don't see why you would lose the service, that particular stop.
Yeah.
Because unless it's done at a local authority level, and we're doing our upload, say, once a month, then it would be in the next upload anyway.
Yeah. Which is also why I can't figure out why I lost 6,500 stops between 2013 and 2016. But also, I'm going to do that. No longer my problem. It's now so old that I just can't. And obviously, nobody's wanted. You've either put them back in individually, or nobody wanted those stops, and they just got removed from the data set. Because it's weird to have an accumulating data set that suddenly lost a ton of stops and then just reaccumulated them. So it could have been they were just lost for a couple of weeks and then you'll just put them back in. But yeah, who knows?
When was this? What year was this?
Somewhere between 2013 and 2016, which was during one of the re-platforms.
Yeah, I was going to say, because the DFT were doing a lot, weren't they, with NAPTAN when the Olympics were about, but that was 2012, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. I've been doing, I did some data spelunking. This was back when I built managed removal. I just went back through all my notes. And this is why I was starting to go, okay, what statuses do we actually need? And is there reasons for some of these that I haven't unpacked? Because we've got a very complicated number of entities to represent essentially 4 stages of a stop, and just trying to understand how different local authorities are using these complicated entities of status and modification. You know, is inactive revise and inactive delete, are they different inside your head? Is one of the interesting things. Is active new, because can you have an active new because somebody's doing them?
Yes.
And what would an active new actually mean?
Is I've made a mistake.
Let me just note that down. An active new meant I made a mistake, because I love that.
How would you do that, Di, then, in your data set?
Well, it's essentially a deleted stop, isn't it? So, yeah, it'd just be one I've created, and I've got the numbering convention wrong, for example.
Yeah, so you just start again with it.
So I just start again.
Yeah, right, okay.
Yeah, we called those oopsies when we had them with with another local authority where they had a typo and they had, oh god, if I say it, it's going to reveal who it is. It was poor Tansy. She had 514 and 541 are 2 of her local authorities, and she'd accidentally typoed. Somebody had typoed 3 stops as 541 rather than 514, and we only allow you to upload a single ATCO code. So it blocked her uploading. So we were just like, if you can remove them from your system, they'll just disappear, and we never knew about them. And that's what happened. They were just oopsie stops. So this would be an example of what we would call an oopsie stop, of like, you don't need to put it through managed removal. It's obviously a typo. Just poof it from the system, and it never appeared. So let me just go. I'm just going to run back here. So
I mean, another sort of valid example rather than made a mistake would be those new stocks at Wynyard. There was some new stocks went in. I had to get them in the system for the operator to get the route registered. There's a borough boundary, so 2 different authority ATCO numbers, and I'd actually plotted it, because I didn't have a map or any knowledge, in the wrong authority. And then when it was actually plotted on the ground, I had to cancel the one authority and make a new stop again in the other authority. So it will be new inactive.
Yeah. So there's 756 of them apparently.
Yeah, but they're not all mine.
No, I wasn't going to say that. I definitely wasn't going to. So one of the things that you'll notice that I haven't done is I haven't done a dive into which local authorities have which, because I feel that's kind of unfair, especially as many local authorities have been through, apart from DIES, which I think you've been looking after it consistently the whole time. Yeah, there's been a lot of local authorities that have had multiple hands on them, and that means there's been kind of little different interpretations all the way through. So none of this is done with a, you've done it wrong. All of this is done with a, I want to understand what's going on so I can make this make sense, because I want to figure out a way to make this make sense. I want to figure out a way to simplify this so it's really obvious for a bus operator or for a data consumer. This is what is meant by this status. This is what is meant by this status. This is what's physically there, and this is what is the data is trying to convey to me, and I can go off and understand it. Because otherwise we end up with, and Leon, this is not to pick on TfL, you've got 2 systems because the NAPTAN system wasn't being clear enough that this stop is out of service for X amount of time. So you're having to use your countdown system to indicate it rather than NAPTAN, which means your journey planners, not to pick on Google because there are other journey planners available, but a journey planner like Google is going, if they want to use NAPTAN, or if they're using NAPTAN as the core of their journey planning, they're not going to go and double check countdown before they present a route to Beryl to go see Beverly. They're just going to present. Travel Line, for example, is not going to grab countdown to double check for a suspended stop. They're just going to present the route as it is in NAPTAN, as it comes out of NAPTAN, using TransExchange, using NAPTAN TransExchange mixed together. So it's kind of, how do we make that, how do we communicate that to these data consumers in a way that means that Beryl has a much better understanding of what's going on the street. And this also applies into when we have Brenda in the wheelchair and Gavin using his cane, understanding what's on the street becomes much, again, almost another layer of importance, because there may only be 2 or 3 bus stops in that village that they can use rather than any of the 10 bus stops, because accessibility is not quite universal everywhere, because streets, and just being able to indicate the stop is out of service. And if you, so the journey planning systems can reroute correctly. That's a long, so yes, this is important to sort out because it's a mess. And I don't know how any journey planner makes sense of it unless they only grab active stops and ignore everything else. Leon's going to tell me that's what they do in London.
So I mean, I have a few thoughts on this. So I think, in terms of, I think we always need to consider, how does things actually play out in terms of someone planning a journey, and I think it works okay as it is. in the sense that trip planners will use the trans-exchange data, and let's say there's a stop that's no longer has a timetabled service. Maybe it's so the trip planners will use that data, and it will know that okay, you can't use that stop because there's no service at that stop. The end user is happy. Where there's kind of short-term closures, then we will put that in the countdown feed, and I think most of the most popular trip planners we use our live data to know when a bus stop is closed, and that has a benefit in the sense that we can set a duration of when that bus stop will be closed, so we can set in advance. So someone planning a journey for next week, and we know that this stop is closed next week, then we can already have that in the system, and then someone planning a journey for then will that will be reflected in their trip plan, in their journey result. The way I kind of imagine that this this field in NAPTAN, this modification field was intended, I suppose it's kind of there to be used in conjunction with the modification date time. So that it was modified at this time, at this date and time, and then that kind of indicates what happened at that time. I think that's how it was kind of intended. But you look at the 490 data set, and aside from those 5 stops that are deleted, all the rest are new. So we've got over 20,000 stops that are brand new apparently, including that one that Stratford Station, which has modification number 728, which is new. So I think obviously that's not what was intended at all, but I think anyone trying to use that data for any kind of real purpose, it's not going to be particularly useful. I mean, I think of course there's it's not ideal, but I just think I do wonder what people use that field for. I kind of view it as metadata almost, rather than actual data for that stop.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure that anyone's I think actually this is, I guess, a question if anyone sort of knows if there's anyone that's actually using this data for any real purpose, because if I can just imagine that if you're trying to use our data and look at the modification, it's not going to be particularly useful to anyone, I think.
So very quick J thought on trying to use NAPTAN data, NAPTAN metadata. It's well, you can see the look on my face because I can't say these words being recorded. It's a right mess. I cannot describe it in any other way. I don't, which is why I'm like, I want to figure out what is intended, what you would like to do almost, and then go, okay, so how do we get good metadata in? Because at the moment the metadata isn't useful. It's not going to help me. There are some created dates that are later than modified dates because they shouldn't be. I see the look from Amy. They shouldn't be. There was a couple of systems that were putting created dates later than modified dates. We also have some people reporting date time down to the attosecond, which is 10 to the minus, I think it's minus 15 or minus 18th of a second. I can't, femto atto. Yeah, minus 18th of a second. Now, that is an incredible precision that may not quite be required of your NAPTAN data. I'm thinking just knowing the date is more than enough. We don't need the time. Where do we draw the line here? How do we get the metadata into a state where it's usable is part of my question here, but also what is the metadata that would be useful to people? One of the things, and Leon, not to, if it's in trans exchange, it's got to have come through bus operators, which means sadly we need to find out from bus operators what they think a stop status means when they're looking at that data. What does active, what does inactive means? The other question, and this is an interesting one, that we get as a side effect from some of the work that we're doing on accessibility. For the non-franchised areas, you often have stops that are unserved, and we can now, NAPTAN is one of the few places you can run a report, or we can produce a report that gives you unserved stops within your local authority. So stops that don't have a trans exchange record that are active. And I think that's in the future world that's coming. That's some quite interesting information, especially if for the places that are looking for franchising, looking at franchising models and looking at where, or trying to understand why those areas are unserved. We can also start to report on how served areas are. We can report on those areas, and you will know them, the areas that have 5 or 6 or more than one bus operator competing to run down the same section of road. So there are some areas that are remarkably well served, and there are other areas that are underserved. So it's like all of that information. We also need to understand what sort of stops are there. Are they what does inactive and pending and all of that mean? Should I just declare data bankruptcy and go, these statuses mean naught, beyond active and inactive? Everything else, don't care about it. As a data consumer, nobody's really paying attention. Just focus on whether it's active or inactive. The other part, that modification and number of modifications means nothing, which is probably what I think they've done, but nobody's been explicit about it. So we've got an hour, we've got some interesting questions about, and I know this is deep diving into something really philosophical and might seem really obvious, and we can move on to something else if people are going like, no, we've had enough talking about this, you've come up with the right idea, we'll declare bankruptcy, we'll just have active and inactive, nothing else matters. And this is where we'll go, Di, you're going to give me some really good wise thoughts.
I think it's probably irrelevant to the downstream users, but it is actually something that occasionally I do use in the office to think when you've got a complaint in about a bus stop, and to go back and to be able to see when it was created and when the last time it changed can sometimes throw light on a situation. And to be honest, I can't think of any examples, but I do use that occasionally.
I was just going to say, searching out complaints. I'm just going to put a note here that's about metadata. I think that's interesting.
I mean,
Amy,
it's our most basic thing. We've got a black book. We have a big black book, don't we? It's in Ian's house now since we moved offices. And it was created when I first started work in 1988. And it's literally maps done on not acetone, but see-through maps with all the bus stops plotted by hand, numbered with what numbering system we were using in those days. And honestly, occasionally, once in a blue moon, we will refer to the black book to see exactly where the position of that particular bus stop was, and whether that throws any light on today's problem, whatever today's problem might be.
Stop is where it is. I'm going to say you should get that digitized. I know that's probably you're probably all going to look at, but I'm like, that is the sort of stuff that should definitely be digitized, just for record keeping. Just ensure that it's never going to. I have no idea what natural disasters could befall the Tees Valley, but if in a natural disaster of some sort or a house fire or something had got burnt up, it would be sad to lose all of that resource. So I'm just, uh, as the person who's got to do historic data and keeping our historic data for 100 years, because that just seemed the sensible time to keep stuff. And it's the longest default that Google would give us. So we set it to 100 years because it's the longest that they will store data for. And we thought that was pretty reasonable to store the bus stop data. And Di, you've just proven that stuff from 1988 is still valid, to sometimes try and understand why bus stops had to be moved or why bus stops are there. You've probably got notes of like, no, do not move this bus stop outside of number 45 because the planning permission woe is way too much. So I'm almost at the metadata doesn't mean anything to our downstream users, and it's more for use, but your system has metadata. Do you need the metadata in NAPTAN, or is it the fact you have the metadata in your system and it's just it gives it to NAPTAN as a have some data?
I think you're probably better off asking the downstream people whether they actually use it.
Yeah. Oh, I will be. I will be chasing. I will be doing some chasing of some of our downstream, especially the data consumers like the bus operators, just trying to understand how they take in and how they see NAPTAN, and if there's fields that they're using in a way that might be. I used to describe how you got into NAPTAN as like you were in this very twisted hermit crab state of uploading NAPTAN used to be in a very specific way, and you had to do kind of a bit of a crunchy thing and wait a day or so to see whether it had happened. And some of that you didn't ever want changed because it was so familiar, but also you had practices that you did that was part of your routine that we needed to understand and kind of fulfill in slightly different ways, let you know that the data's been uploaded and put into the system. Totally fine. You don't need to stress about it. You don't need to go check anywhere else. We'll tell you that the data's in and published. All of those things. I think it's very much the same thing of the data consumers are potentially using some of this data to do things unexpectedly. To use another example, we got rid of a whole pile of the CSV files, if some of you recall. Somebody had a check to make sure that they're downloaded correctly that counted the number of CSV files that came out of the zip. So when we removed the zip and the CSV files within it, we broke a whole part of their system. They weren't using any of those files to do anything. They were literally using them to check that they're downloaded. So we provided them a slightly different checksum that they could use. And it's little things like that that I also want to dig out, because it helps me understand what people have done with the data since. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So we've got 45 minutes. We've covered what's active. I think we've covered what's inactive by talking about it. We've covered what we do when it's temporary out of action. Those are all the questions that I had. Is there anything that we'd like to discuss? I will happily deep dive into anything, assuming that of course I know about it, but I'm happy to deep dive and run a discussion on anything you want to talk about with NAPTAN, bus data, anything that you need.
Do you have a tool similar to what ITO used to have for NAPTAN data to say whether or not your stop's pointing in the wrong direction? Or you're saying you've got all these reporting tools, but do you have anything that an authority could use?
No. So that because everyone keeps asking me for the map, but nobody's told me why they wanted the map. And now you're the first person who's told me a reason for the map. So it's a
just
map.
Why I'm saying that is because the North East is doing a new real-time project. And when they are going out at stops, we're wanting the predictions to be correct. Now that's going off NAPTAN data. And if our stop is slightly out, which it does seem like a few are slightly out, then the predictions aren't going to be correct, or the countdown's not going to be as accurate as we would want. Now, previously, ITO had a fantastic tool which used to say if the bearings were wrong, if you had a naptan in the middle of the North Sea. But obviously that's no longer, and I didn't know whether or not the DFT commissioned something similar.
It is on the long list, but one of the things to allow you behind the veil was there was what was it? There was 136 business rules that we found between ITO and other places that were all contradictory. So if there was a whole pile of conversations, Amy, I think you weren't around for some of these, so totes fine. That we ran through on the business rules, trying to figure out what were the ones that we desperately needed to put in. And after about 3 months of conversations, it was basically none of these at the moment are absolutely vital. So we've taken them all out. But this one is interesting to me. And just bear with me here for 2 minutes. I'm going to see if I can get if Excel is working for me today with all of the stuff that's going on.
It's just the reporting tools that you mentioned before, where you can tell if a bus doesn't go past a particular stop and which stops are inactive, etc. We've got that tool anyway in our database. Di, you'll have that as well as a reporting mechanism. And are you using BODS data for that?
So it's an internal tool that we use for saying, is this a trunk stop? And we do that by seeing between BODS and Transport API, where BODS doesn't have the data because there's some.
Right, I was going to say
some local authorities.
Right.
Yeah. So we use BODS and Transport API, and we count how many buses. So we had a couple of hypotheses whether it was buses or bus services that run through the route and things like that run through the bus stop. We found out its number of buses. So we've got a nice little tool that when you put in a local authority, it gives us how many buses run through bus stops, and we can then look at the frequency and go, right, here's the top, these are obviously trunks, here's the low frequency ones, these are branches, your feeders, and here's the zeros. Now that's just used internally currently for the accessibility work. One of the things that I'm trying to understand is this information useful to other people? And if it is, we will then look at trying to find a way to surface this tool or make this into an actual tool, because we've got all the little code bits that do this.
I would say yes, it is.
We don't know.
I would say yes, it is useful, but from majority of local authorities will produce accessibility data, so I've probably already got the tools to do that sort of thing anyway. What I do feel that we are missing is something that is on Naptan, for us to check our Naptan data.
Yeah, just bear with me here a moment. I'm just having to take a filter off to try to do something, because I don't need all the railway station entrances right now. I want to select them all. Select all. There we are. Because I'm just quickly trying to build a pivot table, because I think your question about bearing is there's in the whole move across systems, your bearings are not quite what you think they are.
They're not, and it all had a brilliant. It used to show you on.
Sorry.
It used to show you if the bearing was incorrect, you could suppress it if you wanted to, or obviously change the bearing and then reload your Naptan data, and that would go into the tool for you actually to check that sort of thing. We used to use it an awful lot to correct our Naptan data, or at least query, maybe not correct, query, because obviously a lot of it was, some of it was computer generated, so it may well be that it is correct on the ground, but at least it made you look at things.
Yeah, and I totally understand, and this is one of the things that at the time we were looking at what we needed to rebuild, and that's why it's like we're we left things alone, and then when we see the need, we surface it and start to understand what was needed, which is why we ended up with managed removal coming in, because we realized it was really needed to get rid of a lot of these old stops we had. For example, Manchester. I am just trying to do something while talking, which is obviously going to go dreadfully wrong. Bearings.
I mean, like I say, NAPTAN changes on local authority area depending upon how many, well, the resources people have to put into NAPTAN. I mean, we're finding that across the whole of the North East, to be honest with you, when we're looking at the NAPTAN for the real-time project, there's a massive difference just between different authority areas across the North East. And we are actually having to have somebody probably go out and check all NAPTANs across Tyne and Wear and County Durham for the location of them for the OSGRs, because obviously at one point you may well have just plotted it on a map, but you're finding it may be so many meters out, which is affecting the real-time predictions if we want in really good, accurate real-time prediction.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. And I've also seen firsthand, because when we went to New Ventures, they showed some of the problems with the tracking, the real-time tracking of buses and bus stops being too close on the opposite sides of the road, so the real-time system would get confused as to which stop it was at, and then it was thinking it almost wanted you to go backwards because it was on the other side of the road. So one of the quick things I've just done is I just quickly looked at bearings. We should have 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, we've got the 8 compass points now. Some of the things that the old system used to do, and this is why there's several months of me discussing the philosophy of NAPTAN and data in NAPTAN, which sounded very obscure, but it was talking about we do not change data. DFT does not touch your data. You give us your data, we do not touch it. Previously, that was not the case. The old system overwrote and rewrote your data for various reasons, because things had happened, people thought that they knew better. So there was a lot of bearings that were rewritten because that you could put the bearing in as a number, and it would translate it into the cardinal points, the 8 cardinal points, and that was an interesting choice. Choices were made, and an interesting way of doing it, because what it meant was that and I think this is why the Ito World tool had to exist, because if you put in a bearing and a number and the system went, oh no, I think it's this bearing, it would switch it around, you would spot it on Ito World, manually switch it around, and sometimes a process would run and switch them back, which is why one of the things when I went through the old Ito World tool in 2020, 2021, just trying to remember my notes, there was a lot of stops that had constantly ping-ponged between states. So an alert would be raised, a correction would be made, because you could see all the history behind a stop up on the Ito World as to what alerts and what suppressions, etc. A suppression or a correction had been made, and then a time later, 6 months, a year, 18 months later, the same alert would be back again, and the person would have to come back and redo it. And this was part of me going, why does this happen? And nobody could explain it. So that was a lot of just trying to understand what the Ito World tool was. We didn't turn it off just for funsies. We turned it off, or we didn't replace it one for one, because in trying to understand what it was doing, there was a lot of this doesn't quite make sense. I now know that this possibly does make sense, and it's a lot of understanding your pairs and the directions that they are based on the road. There's also some interesting, and it came up in the indicator meeting, and it comes up here a little bit as well, is is the direction of the bus when it leaves the stop and the direction of where it's going the same thing? Because sometimes a bus, for example, a bus will leave a stop in a northerly direction, because it then goes up and around the roundabout and heads south to the big city where or the town where it's going to. So the direction of travel is south, but the direction that you leave the bus stop is north. And this was also part of the bearing question: is the bearing the thing that bus operators need for their real-time systems to make them work, or is the bearing for the passenger? I'm believing, the more I hear you, that the bearing is for the real-time systems. And therefore, is it better to have it as these 8 cardinal points, or is it better to have just a little bit more precision and you be able to do it to 10 degrees? So you get more precision. You don't have that problem where it's somewhere between south and southeast, and if the bus leaves on a slight angle, it says, "Oh no, you left the wrong way," or you didn't leave in the right direction, or is south and southeast still good enough? So there's a lot to unpick.
I think
Sorry.
bearings is fine. It's more the coordinates, the OSGRs, northings, eastings that you need to get correct for real time.
Absolutely. And it's getting that down to that meter by meter squared. But it's also how people are building their bounding boxes in their bus systems for how big the bus stop is when the bus is leaving, because there's 2 sets of coordinates that we need to care about. One is for Beryl to find the right bus stop, so she stands in the right place to catch the bus, and the other is for the bus to know where the bus stop is. And those are not exactly the same meter by meter square, because the bus stop, if the bus goes into the same meter by meter where Beryl is standing, it's going to run over Beryl. It's going to be up on the footpath. You need to indicate to Beryl where she needs to stand, but you also need to indicate the bounding of the box for the real-time systems. I know, fascinating.
Yes and no on that, though, because you can obviously program the real-time systems to accept slight differences. But obviously, if we're going to use a NAPTAN data set for everything, then you need to factor in.
I want to use the NAPTAN data set just for what is where, but it's understanding that we're giving where Beryl needs to stand, and you bus operators need to do the boundary boxes for your real-time system so that it will pull up at the correct place and indicate that it's left.
But NAPTAN is being used for everything. So a real-time system will put a NAPTAN, that'll take a NAPTAN feed whenever there's a new one for the area. We do need that one place to look for things.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm not saying NAPTAN shouldn't be that. I'm asking, and it's also about that precision of, if it's where the passenger needs to stand, we need to communicate that more clearly to bus operators, that the NAPTAN data is where the passenger will be standing. So you need to adjust your bounding boxes for your real-time systems to
Which I think most
take
of them
that into account. Yeah.
It's just more so where we know that our NAPTAN database is, obviously somebody may well have gone out and moved a stop slightly and not advised us, so therefore our NAPTAN has never been updated. I don't know about yourself, Di, but does anybody go out now in Tees Valley and really check the positions of the NAPTAN, or once you've put that in, that's it?
So back in the day, we sent people out with a GPS system to plot bus stops. The GPS back in the day was not as accurate as it is these days. There was a good 10-meter drift. But TVCA are currently involved in organising a resurvey of all bus stops across the Tees Valley, which I think, Ian, if I'm right, includes the OSGRs or the GPS.
I believe it does, yeah.
Yeah,
This
which
was
is
why you came to me.
that's what
Yeah.
we're having to do in County Durham and Tyne as well. And as much as we think our database is very good, but obviously there's been changes that we're not
Yeah.
made aware of, and
Yeah.
it's not reflected downstream.
So can I just ask one little assumption question here? You say the changes you've not been made aware of. Is this because the council or the local authorities can move bus stops, or is it because parishes can also move bus stops? Or is it local operators moving bus stops? Who moves a bus stop?
Local authority.
Local authority.
It's just parts of the local authority
It's
not
just
talking
different
to each other.
sections, and it
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily communicate down.
Yeah. Cool.
Or there might have been roadworks. They think it's temporary, and then all of a sudden it becomes permanent.
Or it's a new housing estate's been built and the bus stop was actually on the access road that they've just ploughed in, so they've moved it without.
Yeah, that happens quite frequently, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
So somebody puts in a new housing estate and there's a road into the housing estate, and that's where the stop used to be, but now they've moved it in to be inside the housing estate, so people don't have to look
Or
out to
just
the
further
access
down
road.
the main road that it
Mhm.
was.
Right.
If it was going in the housing estate, then that would be on plans, but just moving it down the road is not necessarily on plans, and we don't get informed about plans anyway these days. So
No.
you
In
find
some
when
cases,
people
it's deleted
comment.
altogether.
Yes, there is that as well.
Fred, sorry, the cat thinks he's a guard dog. Somebody's just walked past the flat, and I have a cat who's basically prowling like a guard dog. I was just trying to reassure him that he is not a guard dog.
So I don't know if the DFT could get the real-time data of where a bus actually stops and do a comparison across a local authority's NAPTAN database and flag up ones that don't seem, or of 100 meters out or whatever.
That's an interesting one. One of the things that I am in the process of doing, I'm just working, is we're going to do a pilot of a feedback form, national feedback form that allows people to say, hey, this bus stop be in the wrong place, whether it's a bus operator or that, so that they don't end up coming to me via bods, via 6 other people.
Mhm.
There's a much more direct way that will just farm it off to potentially the right local authority, and then we'll start getting it down to farming it off to the right person who's looking after NAPTAN to say, hey, I think this bus stop is in the wrong place, and then you've at least got a list of ones to go look at
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
somebody's complained about. But I think this is also an interesting one that I think bods should give you some of the data for, but I'm not entirely sure that it's currently set up to do so, because it's much more about adherence to schedule than here be where I stop, here be
Mhm.
where I think I stop, here be distance, here be the delta. I don't think it's set up for that kind of. It's much more, this was the schedule I was supposed to keep, this is how many times I managed to keep that schedule, which is quite a different use of the same information.
It's just I'm trying to think of a quick fix, really, that.
There are no quick fixes. If there were
No,
quick
there
fixes,
isn't.
we would have done already, Amy.
No, more for local authorities. Ease.
No, and I also meant for yous. I'm very aware that there are no quick fixes in buses, because if there were, you would have done them, because everyone's working as efficiently and as effectively as possible. Leon, do you have any? How does bearings? Because I know real-time information works different in London. I understood. I'm just going to quickly do my understanding of London. London, because it is in many parts quite un-GPSable because of the height of the surrounding buildings, uses the number of seconds from when it leaves a stop to do the next bus stop announcement, and then figures out that it's arrived at a stop by, and I'm just going to say magic, because a lot of the stops are 3 or 4 buses long, so there is no passing a particular point. That's my understanding, and you're going to say, oh no, it actually works this way, and you've completely misunderstood. You've bodged 2 systems together.
So, I mean, it does primarily use GPS, but you're right in terms of when actually, and there's really 2 different timings, and I'm not sure the actual number of seconds, but there are 2 timings in terms of when we kind of show the next bus stop indicator and when we actually do the audio announcements. So they do happen at different times. So you might have the next stop indicator on the actual onboard next stop sign changes, and then at some point later on you might hear the audio announcement. So that there's the different thresholds there in terms of number of seconds. But yeah, I think I mean, it says primarily GPS, and that does have issues where, as you mentioned, there are kind of areas where the signal is patchy, and so you do have times when buses do drop off the system essentially whilst they're in that area, and then they reappear again when they are when there's signal.
Yeah. So, and you're using Siri RT as the main feed for where the buses are, or are you using something slightly different? I just wanted to double check, because that's also one of the main.
So the system that we have at the moment is I mean the data is proprietary. There is a project to and this is public, so I can mention it. The iBus 2 project, which is the kind of next generation of AVL system. So and that will work a bit differently. Quite different actually. So, but this is something that we're working on in terms of what are the implications of that.
That's really good to know, because I know that there is something about TfL not reporting into BODs in some parts, and I think, as far as I understood, it was because you don't use Siri RT as your main real-time location feed, whereas a lot of the systems do, but it's also that's for the real-time bus location, the automated vehicle locations.
I mean, it's not a technical reason. It's just a matter of, well, partly it's a matter of legislation and the fact that the Act of Parliament that required publication of location data to BODs excluded the Greater London Authority, although the fact that we operate bus routes that cross the boundary means that we have to for those routes, and the fact and really there was no reason to not publish data for all of our bus routes. So you can get live location data for all of our buses from BODs. So we do publish that.
Okay.
I know the legislation says you have to publish in Siri VM.
That's it.
I don't know the exact reasons, but we publish a slightly different format, and I don't think it's we could have published Siri VM, but the agreement that we have with BODs is that we publish in a slightly different format.
Always good to know, because it was much more understanding, because I know I've been on some of the new, I think it's the C10 buses have the new AVLs that are the flat screens, not the dot matrices. And they give quite accurate timings as to when you're going to get to particular key bus points or key points on the stop and things like that. So it's fascinating seeing some of the new changes coming in. But that's London, which has bank, not just bank station, but bank, compared to other, and I know not as much as it used to have, but quite a lot compared to some of the other local authorities. So it's kind of understanding what's there and what's possible. I take it, I'm assuming you get told, because you put in bus stops, don't you? TfL puts in bus stops or organises for
Yes.
bus stops to be put in, which is quite
Yes.
different to everyone else in some ways because you've got a lot more control. Right. We've got 20 minutes left. Do we want to talk about anything else? Eastings, we've covered bearings, why we need to provide some help with bearings. We've covered Eastings, Northings, and kind of understood where they're gone a little awry. Di, I sent you a copy of the form that we've been using for accessibility so that at least if you're looking at stops and doing an audit, you're asking the same questions that we're looking at for accessibility. I did that, didn't I?
Did you?
Did I? I thought I did. It is a little form that we had set up. Just give me 2 seconds. I've got a version of it. This is the street furniture. If not, I will throw it out because Amy, if you're also doing a street furniture assessment, this is not saying collect this data. It's saying this is the data that we're currently working with A plus NAPTAN, because we got a lot more from other local authorities when they came to us. So we've got the ECHO code, we've got what kind of surface it is, we've got whether or not there's tactile paving at the bus stop. Some people do, some people don't. We know it's quite different in London. Hopefully we'll get to talk to the IDAG soon and understand how somebody from somebody who is blind in London navigates, because I think there's a dialect for London that allows people to navigate the street partially sighted that might be quite different to other places, because London's very standardized in some of its infrastructure. Is there tactile paving? What type of tactile paving? Is there a controlled crossing nearby? And we do this just by standing at the bus stop with Google View and looking around, going, can we see a crossing as we spin around, and what type of crossing it is? Can we see a curb cut nearby? Always really useful. And what type of tactile paving might be at the curb cut, because that's used quite a bit. And then we have high, medium, and low curb, which we use to indicate, and we've got some images just to help people on the team stay consistent as to what they're calling high, medium, and low. And then we've got some other street furniture that we indicate if we can see it. And this is one of the funs of Google Street View, or playing around with that, is sometimes you can't see some of the things. So we sometimes can't see if it's got a real-time display or not. We can see that there's a timetable case, but we can't see whether it's got a timetable in it, or it could be just a little advertising block. We're not 100% sure. Shelters, bus shelters, cycle lanes behind the bus stop. So not cycle lanes that share the bus lane, but cycle lanes that are between you and your continued journey. Just making sure that we can alert for those if needed. Footway width, we're still looking at. However, currently, just to let you know, don't worry about measuring footway width too much, because we are working with Ordnance Survey and they're able to give us footway width for and surface for the entire country. So we're just working with them to get that data down and investigate it. Is it a clearway? That's just helping people sight and see buses. Is there advertising? Because people have eyeballs. The more people who are traveling in an area, the more eyeballs. And we also know that if you've got advertising, the bus shelter's more likely to have the bus stop's likely to have more street furniture. So it's a nice little correlation point. Bus pole, flag, and road markings, and then some notes. So it's a relatively lightweight form, and I can send you a copy of that to have a look at if you'd like. Diane, Amy, if you're setting up a survey, it kind of gives you a start of a 10 at least of what you might want to look for at bus stops to help us with that accessibility piece.
I mean, yes, send it over. I think it's possibly already been finalised.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
audit.
I'm 99% sure that I sent it to you, but
I haven't got
also
it.
then I have thought I've sent it to you, and it has literally just been my my brain. I will I will do that after this call, and I will make sure that I do this after this call. Amy, would you like it as well? Are you also doing surveys in your area?
Again, send it through, but I think our surveys are going to be a quick somebody drive round to make sure locations, because we need it fairly quickly, to be honest with you. I don't think we're doing that much of an in-depth survey yet.
No
But it is
worries.
handy to know that that is about, and once we get resources to be able to do something like that, then yes.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Like I said, we're not sending it out as this is the schema or anything like that for accessibility. It's more, here's some things that would be great if you can get them. Don't worry if you can't. We'll figure it out if you can't. But these are some great ones. The things that people didn't think from some of the street furniture stuff that was done when people went out to survey was pathway width, which we've been able to find another source for, but also tactile paving, because a lot of people just didn't realize that that could be important. So we're just letting people know that these are there. We're also aware London has a, a, a dialect of tactile paving that it uses all across London, which is much more about road crossings than bus stops. So it's understanding how your partially sighted or your cane using visually impaired cane using users walk around London and understand, because London's got so much street furniture, it's crazy. Just the sheer volume of stuff on the street. So trying to understand how people find bus stops when they're visually impaired and using a cane is a really interesting question. Anything else we want to cover?
I don't really want to sound like a broken record, but national stops are still a big thing for us.
You're not a broken record. That's why I'm going to talk about what we're doing with the rail stops, because the fact that there are multiple pieces to unpick, but the fact that we don't find out about national stops until your Come Yalla does, and yet it's up on a national rail website. There are places where this data is published. We are trying to get our hands on that feed, and I know everyone's been like, why not just add these stops while you're doing the audit? And it's like, because all of the audits that I've done have missed some of the new stops that I've been told about. So it's trying to understand where the audit data is going wrong. So I got a ton of audit data from the Rail Data Marketplace, and it was all missing Brent Cross West and a couple of other very, very key stations that Leon was coming to talk to me about. And I have spent quite a while trying to unpick why the audit wasn't an audit, because that doesn't help me set up the system properly. So I want to make us find out when a stop is going to come live and get the information, so we're not having to chase around, because Leon can't give me all of the information for a lot of stops either. Brent Cross West, we needed to go and track down its tip lock, its definitive locations, all of that. If we want to bring in rail replacement buses, if we need to sort out rail station entrances to be a lot more sane. I was trying to think of another word, but sane would be the right word. We need good audit data coming into us. So I've been spending my time chasing that down. I know everyone's yelling at me to put in Luton Parkway, but no one could tell me whether it should be a metro stop or a national rail. And then somebody said make it the same as the Gatwick Interterminal, because it's very, very similar. Turns out the Gatwick Interterminal was put down as a rail station. So one of the things that I'm also trying to do is a 910 stop. So one of the things that I'm trying to do is to get a definitive, this is what is a 910 stop, this is what a 940 stop is, because we're putting stuff in when people request, and it's going in the wrong way, and it's going in the wrong places, which is causing even more extra work and more crazy. So yes, I know that it's a problem. I understand your frustration because I am feeling it, because I am doing everything I can to figure out the best way of making this work so that 2050 me does not have to deal with this, because I've been dealing with this since 2020, and that's several years way longer than I would have liked to have been dealing with the same existential problems of what is a rail station. And I asked people, and Leon seen me ask on the TFL data forums, what is a rail station, and get completely wild answers. Like everyone's got a real difference of opinion as to what is a rail station. So I'm needing to even unpick and describe what is a rail station. Yes, we are back to what is a bus stop. 4 months later, we ended up with a bus stop is where the bus stops. And yes, I know a train station is where a train stops, but what is a train and what is a tube, and what happens? What is more important to know, that it's a train station? Chalfont and Latimer is my little example. It's a train station that also has Metropolitan line tubes calling. What is more important to know, that it's a train station or that it's a tube station? Or does it not matter, and it's about the services that you're catching, and as long as it exists in the travel planners, they can sort it out. If it was an easy problem, I wouldn't be trying to solve it. How's that, Leon? Does that, I see you smiling because you're like, oh, I didn't realize it was quite so complicated. I just thought you were sitting on your hands.
It is complicated, although I think, yeah, I think that there's processes that probably need to be unpicked there. Although I think some of these are more clear cut than others, and I don't know whether there's a way to, certainly I would say if it's kind of a national rail station, if it's right there on the National Rail website, then there should be a 9:10 stop.
Absolutely.
I don't know whether, but then there are these edge cases, so
yeah, and
I don't know whether there's a way to sort of get some of these more less kind of controversial stops in there, and then maybe some of these yeah.
So I am trying to get into I'm trying to get into the feed that runs the National Rail website, so that I get told when they put a station on, because then I can put it in Naptan without you having to come to me and scream at me that it's already up on the National Rail website. Unless I check it every day, I'm never going to know that there's a new station in there. So we're actually trying to get hold of the right people. BB is the product owner who is helping us with that, try to unpick the rail delivery marketplace, the rail delivery group, and the National Rail and GBRTT and all of the stuff that's going on, trying to find the person who runs that website and get their feeds. How many months has it been, BB? It's been more than 4 months of us being sent backwards and forwards.
Yeah, it's difficult, but
we
will persevere as long as it takes.
Yeah, and we know the problem. And again, this is also part of the problem of I'm also trying to clean out the 910 so that it's only got the stops that it should have, which was also part of trying to do an audit to understand what stops should be up on the National Rail. And like I say, when you've got an audit that skips stops and is missing stops, that causes a lot of concern that I might take out a stop that I shouldn't. So that's why I'm trying to get a definitive audit list, which has been much of 2020, last year and this year, has been working with the rail through the rail data marketplace to try to find a definitive list and understand what is the right definitive list, because they're missing different stops. And I don't know why. No one can tell me why they're missing different stops. So yeah, Leon, other than me going through, so one of my fun things is I watch Jen on the trains and a couple of others who are doing every stop on the so and so network, because they're one of the few definitive I know where the stops are, because I have video of somebody going through and looking at these stops, which is not the way that we should do it. It's programmatic. It's 2,500 2,600 and something stops, and I know that there should be a list out there, and I know that there will be a list out there somewhere. It's finding the right list. It's finding the list with the information on. I'm sorry. This is why next month we're talking about rail and rail replacement and all of that, because I want to update everybody on where we've got to, but also on some of the stuff that we're going to have to try to do in the next couple of months to make rail replacement buses meet PSV AIR rules, because they have a short-term exception and we have a ticking, we have time to get the data in so that they can do that. Sorry, that was a long rant. My apologies for long rants. Hopefully this has been useful. I know it's been we spent a lot of time on statuses, and we've gone off a little bit on understanding bearings and that, which I think has been really great. And thank you, Amy. It is something that we do need to look at and put into our backlog of things to think about, and to how we help use all have the right information so that you're doing things and things are going in the right places. As always, feedback corner. Tell me what's given you joy, what was good and useful, what frustrated you, what was not good or useful, and what made you sad, things that are missing, things that should be happening. I have managed to grab an old one that doesn't have BB and Geeta's contact details on there. There's mine, and that if you get to the central mailbox, all of us read the central mailbox. It's no longer, it doesn't just fall on me, it falls on, we've got quite a few people reading the central mailbox so that stuff doesn't get stuck in people's individual mailboxes. Stuff actually happens. I'm going to stop sharing because I just wanted to thank you all for your time and attention. Is there before we run away, anything else, or I will see you all in a month's time?